Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams, Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans. We'll talk about it all. And, of course, we are coming to you from our temporary studios as we've moved out to Metairie. And, of course, our first guest is Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports. Sean, how you doing?
Doing great. Looking at the new setup here. Yeah. Kind of nice. I know you guys are kind of in the process of getting everything set up over here, but good to be with you. Good to be back for Inside New Orleans Sports.
I want to thank everybody again that was involved in again helping us record some shows. So again, that we had fresh shows for you every single week, with the exception of 1 week. But hey, who didn't want to see Ro Brown twice? I really did. But again, we're glad to be back and again bringing you Inside New Orleans Sports once again. All right, let's start with the New Orleans. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about what's going on at Fox 8. Yeah. You guys just talked about we talked about on the radio show. Have just put out your fall schedule. It's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, right now we're doing our podcast, the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. We just dropped one on Monday. We'll have another one on Wednesday. Wherever you get your podcast, the YouTube channel. So check that out. Andre Johnson Jr. and myself do that podcast. Kind of become a passion project of mine doing that podcast. So it's been fun. And obviously right now we're doing the Tuesday night overtime show at 10:35. Thursday night 10:35 final bet. And of course Sunday the final play at 10:35 as well. Once the fall season gets here, late July into August, really once September gets here when we start talking about all the specialty shows. We have the Monday Black and Gold Review, Tuesday Overtime, Wednesday Game Plan, Thursday Final Bet, Friday Fox 8 Football Friday, and then Sunday we do the Fox 8 Live Tailgate and the Final Play as well. So a full lineup. This is kind of the in-between time, so a lot of us are getting our vacation in before we get, it's all gas, no brakes once late July gets here.
And I was going to say that again. You work so much during the year. You can say
that little window,
weeks, he'll get a little bit of a break, and then he's right back at it. He'll be out in Irvine, California for the Saints training camp. All right, let's start with the Saints, and let's start. Look, we agree on this. There's not a lot you can read into OTAs and minicamp because football is a violent sport. It's tackling, it's pads, and you don't have that. Again, when you're doing OTAs, but you can get a little look at guys' athleticism, and in this case, you got a chance to be able to see a little bit of this new offense, which is something again that was a little bit different than what we've seen obviously in the Peyton era. So why don't you take it from there? Your thoughts, what you saw in OTAs and minicamp?
Well, it was very different. I mean, I've done these OTAs for forever. We go to these OTAs, we kind of have the same sort of feel for what we could see, what we may not see, what we'll see that doesn't really matter, what we see that could maybe stick around. And to me, the most curious thing or the most interesting thing that we saw was the new offense and how it looks and how it's going to look, the things they did, the routes that they practiced, the way they executed certain plays. We've been so accustomed to seeing the same sort of thing for so long. When you talk about the Peyton era, then into Carmichael, it's been 16 years of the same offense. So to see something new, something different was refreshing to see. You also kind of get a glimpse of what works, why it works. Everything builds off of everything else. I've said this multiple times, that the routes that they practice were so much different than the routes we've seen in practice before. I mean, it's just, it was a detail in the routes, and it was a route, it's one of those things where it was hard to even name the route because it's specific to the play they're practicing that day. So you're not seeing your straight deep post or a quick out, whatever the case may be. There was sort of bending in, out. It was different. And it's refreshing to see because I think it needed it. And this is coming from someone that, look, I liked Pete Carmichael. I think he was a key component. The Saints do not win a Super Bowl without Pete Carmichael. He was a key component of the most successful run in Saints history. But as with everything, time comes and you got to make changes. And obviously this was a change. And this is what's working right now in the NFL. So the wide zone, the stretch boot, you see why it has effectiveness across the NFL. And it's just for us, because we've been trained to see certain things a certain way for so long, it was just different. And I hope different means better, because that's all it's going to matter once the season starts.
Are the routes shorter?
Sometimes they can be. They're designed to be shorter to take advantage of run after catch. There's a lot of over routes, drag routes. There's a lot of bootlegs where guys kind of come from one side of the field to the other. So it's not like they didn't have that in the previous offense. They did. They had that in the previous offense. But to see this new system, and it's not a new system around the NFL. It's new within the Saints. Kind of how it builds off of itself. To me, for someone like myself that loves film, loves to kind of watch how plays are constructed and how it works matchup-wise and why you do a certain thing. To me, it was very interesting to see, and it piqued my curiosity. It's the number one thing that's giving everyone hope or optimism this offseason, because you're coming off of a year where you didn't meet expectations. You went 9-8 and missed the playoffs, third year of the Dennis Allen era. So there was a little bit of staleness around the organization that I do think at least this compartment, this part of the organization, revive things a little bit. And I think that new blood, that new juice, and the fact that everyone around the offense is learning it at the same time, I think can certainly help as well.
When you look at the tree, Shanahan-Kubiak tree, and you start talking about this offense, the Kubiak side, again, heavy run.
Always, yeah.
Shanahan, again, run, but again, you're seeing the motion, the short passing game, again, the blocking downfield, getting guys open. We've seen Deebo Samuel again, what he's brought to the table in terms of that San Francisco offense. When you've seen the San Francisco offense and you compare and contrast to what New Orleans is running now, similar?
Yeah, I mean, they're similar, but we weren't able to. I mean, look, we got to see 6 practices, so obviously it's not as advanced as it's going to be. And every offense is going to tailor itself to different matchups within their division, and also the personnel that they have and the personnel that they're obviously going to be facing. So I don't know if it's going to be exactly the same, but there is a lot more motion. It's a lot more movement, and that's only the beginning of OTAs. They're not going to show us everything, obviously, in OTAs, but you can certainly see that now. Just the inner workings of the start of that new offense with certain things they're going to implement. And this was obviously an offense that's built around the run, built around the wide zone, which is a very specific run play. Everyone runs it, but it's how you dress it up. It's how you call it in certain situations, the personnel groupings that you do it out of, and then what you do off of that wide zone, which is with the bootlegs, the drags, all those sorts of things are certainly what happens in this system. And it opens up play action, which obviously is something Derek Carr flourishes in. And I've got to be honest, this is the June faction or the June part of the calendar, so it means nothing to no one. But if I'm being honest, the most consistent player, perhaps the best player I saw through 6 practices for the Saints, war number 4. It was Derek Carr. So clearly he's adapting to it well in the early stages, but it's just that, the early stages.
All right, let's talk personnel. It took San Francisco a while to again get the type of player that can play that system. When you look at the players that are on this roster, okay, let's start with wide receivers. Is it the prototype that should be utilized in this system? Or are we going to see over time, the next couple of years, if this regime stays in place, there'll be a little bit of a change in the prototype of wide receiver?
That remains to be seen, because I will say Chris Olave has gotten a little bit better at run after catch.
Okay.
Shaheed has always been, a deep ball threat, but they do want him to get a little more diverse in the route tree that he's able to run. You have guys like Cedric Wilson, who's a wily veteran. You have A.T. Perry, who is a guy that I think came on towards the end last season. If he's ready to take over the 3 role, or is he the 4? Is Cedric Wilson the 3 or the 4? I guess we'll see. You have a guy like Bub Means, who's a physical receiver that can work between the seams. You have Equimanius St. Brown is another guy, huge. He's like 6'5". Had a really decent OTA set of practices that we were able to see. So I think from a receiver standpoint, that remains to be seen, because I will say they really do highlight run after catch in this offense. And you're designing plays to get guys in space. It's a high percentage throw, a guy in space that could take off and run after. Just look at San Francisco's receivers. That's what they do. So, and
but they're physical.
And they're physical, but it's not just receivers, too. It's tight ends as well. So that remains to be seen. We'll see if they address that position at some point. But I do think that is, if you talk about prototype, I'm not sure if prototype is the right word, or it's skill set, what they value. And I do think run after catch is something they place a premium on.
With Juwan Johnson going down, there's even more question marks about the tight end position, which is a big position in this offense. From what you've seen, players that, again, that maybe could emerge in this offense.
Well, I mean, look, tight end position is something to really watch, because you're right. They do a lot of two tight end sets. They do a lot of 21 personnel, and sometimes the tight end fullback can be kind of a hybrid, Taysom Hill type of player, Juszczyk type of player. So I do think they need that player to emerge to get the types of matchups that they're trying to get within this offense. And right now, if Juwan Johnson is out, you have Foster Moreau, you have Dallin Holker, who is an undrafted rookie, who I really like, had a really good camp. Michael Jacobson, another guy who used to play college basketball. Then what? And you have Taysom Hill, and there's a couple other players, and they just signed, was it Jesper Horsted? So we'll see. So you can't tell me they're finished at that position. That position is way too important to this offense, perhaps more to this offense than other offenses, just based off of what they do, run game and pass game, based off of how they dictate matchups. So Juwan Johnson being out is interesting, because if he can't do training camp, there are so many reps that have to be taken. You can't just give it all to one guy or two guys. That's a lot of wear and tear on your body in training camp. So that's something I think they have to address at some point.
Plus, you're learning a new offense, and you have to run a new offense as well.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's a big part of it. Yeah, I think that's one of the positions they're going to have to take a hard look at. There's no doubt about it. Running back. They got a room full of backs, okay? We'll start with Kamara first. Well, again, I think this is tailor-made for him, this offense. Miller's been often injured. Williams is a guy that, again, did not have a good year last year. Critique the running back room and how they fit with this offense.
Well, I mean, look, this is a running back friendly offense. It's designed to, we've seen backs of, no-name backs, frankly, have success in this offense. It's just, you see guys revive their careers in this offense. You see what happened with Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco. So it is a running back friendly offense. In saying that, obviously there are players that have a skill set that fits this offense better. Alvin is certainly one of those guys with his versatility and his ability to be somewhat smooth with the football in his hands, and maybe he can, they want him to excel, obviously, in this offense. Kendre Miller is another guy. I mean, because honestly, they want him to emerge. This is the second year they invested a relatively high draft pick on a running back these days, third-round pick. Only played in 8 games a season ago, but showed some flashes, so perhaps he could be a guy. Jamal Williams, he's in a battle. I mean, he's got, he averaged, I didn't realize he averaged 2.9 yards a carry last year. It just was not there for him a season ago. Is that a sign of him aging? I don't know. But, he certainly loves this offense. He says me like him many times when we asked him about the new offensive situation. So that's a player as well. And then you have a guy we didn't really talk a whole lot about was Jordan Mims. He was a guy that, man, all of a sudden you see him bouncing outside. You see a burst. You see some quickness. I don't know if it's a situation where most of the plays were designed for him to go outside, but nonetheless, he looked pretty good. So he's a guy you may have to watch going forward when it comes to training camp, because I thought he was a player that showed a little bit. So the running back position, it's a running back friendly offense. We know that. And I think they take that position so seriously within this offense. So I think that's something that, we'll see who emerges. But I do think right now, obviously, top dog is Alvin Kamara.
All right, let's talk about Kamara, and let's talk a little bit about the contract situation. Kamara walks out of the last mini camp, did not participate in the practice. We know that is now contract related. Give me your thoughts on where they are.
Well, nothing as of this taping. Nothing has really emerged, which is not surprising. I don't expect those two to really get close to getting where they're going to be, and so get closer and closer to training camp. That's just how these things work. When you get closer and closer to something, the deadline tends to spur the action. Right now, there's no real, I don't know if you call it urgency, but they don't have to get it done right this second. The more I look at the situation, though, Eric, I mean, obviously Kamara has his leverage. But I don't think either side has all the leverage. I think both sides have a little bit of leverage, but also some significant risk. Obviously, Kamara knows this is his last chance to get a payday. Also, who is behind him that's been a proven guy. you don't know that at this point. But also he's 29 years old, or he's going to be 29 years old, and obviously at 29, that's the later in your career for a running back. And if you're the Saints, you have to protect your investment as well. And also this, it really boils down to 2025. So, if they can't agree on something in 2025 and all of a sudden they don't come to an agreement, can Alvin really sit out? I mean, because if he wants some kind of contract, he's got to play this year or to get some kind of guarantee for next year. Because if he were to sit out at the age of 29, go on the market at 30 after not playing a season, is he going to get the money he could possibly get with the Saints? I think the Saints are the team that can give him the most money, guaranteed money for 2025. Yeah. Just a matter of where is that sweet spot? Where can they meet in the middle there? Yeah,
look, when you bring in a guy like Kubiak, the vision is a guy like Kamara, based on, and look, him and McCaffrey have been compared to each other their entire career. Yeah. And we saw what this offense did for McCaffrey, so you got to figure it's going to do the same thing for Kamara. We saw his frustration last year, again with Carr, with the offense. Now, this is tailor-made for him to be able to have a great year. If you're the Saints and you don't get something done and you roll the dice, all of a sudden he has a great year next year with no guaranteed money. You get out of the contract and save about I think about $16 million against the cap,
something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. But again, you might be losing maybe your best back on the team.
Yeah,
but I don't.
But again, you talk 30-year-old running back. It's a 30-year-old running back. I don't. Yes, that makes.
Does he have a 30-year-old running back's tread on the tire, though?
Maybe. I mean, his carries have really gone up the last couple of
years. When you look at the film, you tell me
he's a guy that, there's been some wear and tear on his body just from a second-level explosive, third-level explosive type nature. You don't see the explosive runs that you would normally see from Alvin Kamara you saw earlier in his career. The dip the last 3 seasons has certainly been significant. So, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that, he just, magically reappears in his offense and he's fantastic. I think he will be. Yeah. But nonetheless, if he gets to 30 years old, I don't think he's got, even coming off a good year, I don't think he's going to have quite the leverage to score a big deal. That's why he's pushing the issue right now, because he can. It's the only spot he's going to be able to do it. But it really boils down to, what are you willing to guarantee him in 2025? Because anything past 2025, to me, I think the Saints, that's too risky for the Saints.
I agree with that. So. But again, maybe for cap purposes, you have to do that with dummy years.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. But what do you think the number is?
We broke down the numbers on our podcast. Right. We looked at it for 2025. We looked at the running back market, where he's at. Derrick Henry signed a 2-year, $16 million deal. He's 30 years old. I think he could probably get more than that. To me, he probably falls somewhere in the neighborhood between $10 and $12 million guaranteed. I think we settled in at 11 and $11.5 million guaranteed for 2025. To me, that's a fair value. That's the fair number. You get that in 2025. I think if you're Alvin, you got to really strongly consider that, because honestly, I'm not sure if any other team would offer that if you played out the season and then hit the free agent market at 30 years old. I keep going back to that because it's the truth.
Right.
Derrick Henry has had a phenomenal career.
Yes.
And obviously a different type of backs, but he got 2 years, $16 million at 30 years old. What's Alvin Kamara going to get that? Would he get that? Maybe. Yeah. But that's $8 million a season. If you can get 11 with the Saints for 2025, to me, that's something you got to strongly consider.
Yeah, and of course, if you throw some incentives in there as well, so, you can obviously make some of that money. All right, let's talk a little bit about the quarterback position. And Derek Carr, you mentioned, looked like really good in minicamp and OTAs. But it looks as though this team is going to go with 2 unproven guys backing him up in Haener and Rattler. What are your thoughts on that?
When you kind of put it like that, it's risky. I mean, especially when you talk about Carr exiting 3 games a season ago. So it is risky. And I know, let's go back to 2010 or 2011. Kind of felt like, the Saints brought in Patrick Ramsey, they had Chase Daniel, and to back up Drew Brees, they went with the undrafted, I guess it was a second-year player, but a young player nonetheless, in Chase Daniel. So I do think it's risky, but you have a guy second year with the Saints and Jake Haener. You have a guy, an experienced college guy, obviously, in Spencer Rattler, that showed some promise, but also showed some flaws in his first ever OTAs, which is obviously to be expected. I think it's going to be one of the premier battles at training camp, those 2 guys, whoever gets to be QB number 2. So, I do think that is a risk. And if it ever got to that point where one of them would have to play, maybe the Saints would have to make another kind of move if they didn't necessarily feel confident in those guys. But right now, Rattler and Haener, to me, are the guys behind. It's actually, I would put Haener above Rattler at this point for QB2. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with Peterman. I mean, do they keep him around for practice squad just to be the veteran, just to kind of bounce ideas off of? Because clearly the rep distribution didn't make a whole lot of sense when we watched it out there at OTAs. How many reps he's going to get in training camp? So there's got to be another reason why he's there that's more than just actually what he's doing on the football field.
Do you think those reps and the majority of the reps going to, again, a Hainer and a Rattler was an OTA minicamp type thing, and maybe we'll see more reps for Peterman in training camp? Maybe they wanted to see what they had?
I guess, but I mean, it's 4 quarterbacks having to get reps.
I know.
I mean, that's a lot of players having to get significant reps, and not just reps, but enough reps to get better.
Right.
That's what you really need, especially with 2 young guys. Those guys need all the reps they could possibly get.
But everybody's in this new offense for the first time, so they all need reps.
So to me, this is a situation where you want, if you didn't have Rattler or you didn't have Hainer, then it makes all the sense in the world to rotate Peterman in. But the way they did it in OTAs, it was like Peterman would get 2 reps of practice. It was like mixed in with the third team. It was really kind of weird the way it mixed itself in. So we'll see what happens once training camp gets here. But I want those young guys to get as many reps as possible, especially since both those guys are going to play a lot in the preseason.
In free agency, in the offseason, one of the things they did was there was a focus on getting guys that played this system previously. A lot of one-year deals. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Have you seen in OTAs and minicamp those guys that have experience maybe leaps and bounds ahead of the other guys?
No, I don't know that I would necessarily say that, because it would be hard to really decipher who those guys. I mean, like Cedric Wilson, those guys got experience.
St. Brown has experience.
He played well. St. Brown, he had his moments, but Chris Olave, I thought really had a nice camp, at least what we were able to see. I thought Shaheed had his moments. I thought Bub Means had certainly had his moments. A.T. Perry had a few moments here and there. It was hard to get a read on the running backs because you're not really tackling anything, and obviously offensive line we don't know until the pads come on. So other than maybe Cedric Wilson, I would say it's probably what and what. Okay. I mean, there was a couple of moments there where it kind of looked like, he was really kind of excelling, but that could be also the system, but also the fact he's a veteran, he's been around for a while.
Right, because that was an emphasis on going after guys that knew the system. If there's not a big gap between those guys, then obviously you're going to go with what you know.
Right.
All right, offensive line. Hard to really decipher what's going on because they're not in pads. But yet, their starters were all the guys they've drafted. Okay,
that's right.
Okay, that's all. Right. That's their draft. That's not the guys they brought in with experience. Not the guys that came in on one-year deals. Not guys like Patrick and Lemieux and Udo and all these guys they brought in, who I really think again are the ones who are going to compete for the stars. There's Saliveri out there, obviously Penning, Fuaga, and of course again, McCoy and Ruiz. Okay. Do you think that's your starting 5?
No, I don't. It might be fine in June to say that's the starting 5.
No pads.
Maybe they're ahead in the lead, but I cannot see them unless they are that confident going with 3 out of 5 guys, basically no NFL experience. You talk about Penning, you talk about Saldivari, you talk about Taliesin Fuaga. I just don't see it. This year is too important. Excelling in this offense is too important. You need the right 5. So that's fine for June. And look, I don't want to discount what Saldivari's done, because clearly he did something to earn those reps, because there wasn't a whole lot of rotation there. Early on in OTAs, it was with Lemieux, but every other practice we saw, Saldivari was the guy until the last minicamp practice. He exited practice early with some kind of cramp or some kind of hamstring type issue. But nonetheless, I think at some point that's going to have to be a genuine competition, whether it's Aliudo, whether it's Lucas Patrick, who was the second team center. I think Saldivari can win the competition, but it has to be a competition. And I think this new offensive coaching staff understands just how important it is to get that right. It's the biggest unknown, the biggest question mark. If that group comes together and they are an exceptional offensive line, you can talk about a lot of success this season. But if it doesn't, you're mixing and matching, kind of like you had to do last year, that could be a major problem for a team and an organization that has to win. They have to win. So it's fine to look at the offensive line right now as that 5 in the lead, but I don't know if it stays that way once the season starts. Yeah, and of course, again, it's hard to be able to tell anything unless you have pads on. Exactly. Okay? I mean, it's a physical game. In the trenches, a physical game. All right, before we take a break and hear from our underwriters, Taysom Hill. What is his role going to be? I mean, he's played FH, he's played tight end. Again, what's his role going to be? And again, maybe equate it to what we've seen with other players in San Francisco. His role is going to be Taysom. That's
Okay.
going to be his role.
Right.
You can put him in his own column. You know, I do my roster projection. I had a hard time figuring out which column to put
Sure,
him in.
right.
You know, last year I put him in tight end. This year I put him in running back because we saw him take more true running back snaps, more running back carries than we've ever seen with the Saints. So Taysom Hill is his own category. Taysom Hill is going to be I don't know if he's going to get a lot of tailback reps once the season starts. It was something maybe that we're trying for OTAs. He was playing fullback. He was playing tight end. We didn't see a whole lot of quarterback reps, but I'd be surprised if they totally got rid of that. So to me, Taysom Hill is probably, who would I compare him to? He's probably a Juszczyk plus. In other words, he can do what Juszczyk does, but he adds the Taysom element, the versatility. Juszczyk is a versatile player, reliable player, a very good player for that system. And I think Taysom can be that guy, but he also runs a 4-4.
Right.
He can also get downfield. He can also run a QB power. He can also run a read option. He can also run a quarterback draw. So I think he's Juszczyk plus is probably the closest comparison. But let's be honest, there's no other Taysom in the NFL, given all the stuff he can do in an offense. And they've even unlocked more, which is something to say considering how much he was used in the last regime.
Final question on the offense. All right. Is it Derek Carr that is the most critical player on this team for success? Or is it the position group of offensive line that is the most critical position for the success of this offense?
I'm always going to lean towards quarterback just because he's the guy that gets it every play. And even if an offensive line isn't playing well, there's going to be snaps where they do play well, whereas the quarterback has got to bring it, play in and play out, getting in the right play, knowing the right system. Theoretically, the system is set up for him to have success because we all saw it. We all saw when they added more play action how much better he played towards the end of last season. So if he can have a season like he finished the entire season this year, I think there's going to be a lot of success on the offensive side of the ball for the Saints. But look, it's very close, but I'm going to always lean towards the quarterback because it's the most important position. But if they take a huge dip on the offensive line, it may not matter. So I guess we'll see.
Some quarterbacks have escapability. They have mobility. They have the ability to be able to make things happen if their offensive line breaks down. Carr doesn't look like one of those guys. He looks like a guy that needs his offensive line to be able to be stout, to give him a pocket, to be able to get the ball downfield. And of course, look, opening up holes for the running game, for me, it's the offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. And make no mistake, that would be 1A. If Carr's 1, that's 1A for the success of the entire offense. That's why we just said it's so important to get the right 5. And it's so important to not have any kind of bias in terms of who should or shouldn't be there. Let the tape do the talking. Let the tape determine who is going to be the right 5. Because if you can get in sync with the right 5 and the quarterback and the run game with this offense that has had so much success, you may have something brewing here for the Saints in 2024, at least on offense. So we'll see.
Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports is our guest. I'm your host, Eric Asher. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. When we come back, we'll talk about the defense. Then we're going to get into the Pelicans. Again, what may happen with the Pelicans with the draft. Again, free agency. And also, again, Brandon Ingram. What's his future with the New Orleans Pelicans? Stay tuned.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports is our guest. We talked about the offense. We broke that down going into training camp. We'll talk about the defense. And Again, a lot of one-year deals they gave out this year, but one of the most critical one-year deals I think on this defense is going to be, and I want to go linebackers first, Willie Gay, his addition. Traditionally, again, with Dennis Allen, we've seen him, again, concentrate on more defensive backs on the field. Again, that's been his forte, being a defensive back coach. As a defensive coordinator, he's utilized that, the athleticism of defensive backs. This may be maybe a little bit of a sea change for this defense because Willie Gay's ability to rush the passer, be able to cover. Hard to be able to keep him off the field, in my opinion. I think they'll play more 3 linebacker set. What did you see, and what is your vision?
He's got great sideline to sideline range,
Right.
which obviously is something that they need. He's got a very unique ability to. He's the spy when it comes to these running quarterbacks, these mobile quarterbacks.
Yes.
Which obviously the Saints have had, some issues in the past when defending. These athletic mobile guys. Will get a bunch of them obviously this season. One of the reasons why they targeted him, and they targeted him and got him, a pretty good rate. 1 year, $5 million contract is not too bad. So yes, I think they'll use more 3 linebacker sets. The question is, do they use 3 linebacker sets even when they're in nickel? Because that dictates how many linemen you're going to have on the football field. And Dennis Allen likes to go dime when it's 3rd and medium, 3rd and long. So does he come in and one of the guys go out during dime? Is it Werner? I doubt it'd be Mario Davis. Does he rotate in 3rd down situations? All things that can certainly be determined. But I do think he's a guy they really like. He's got some speed, and I think he's pushed Werner a little bit. Werner had a good OTA session. He really did. And he's a guy going into a contract year. Both those guys technically are going into contract years. And he's got it dipped a little bit last year. So I do think they're challenging Werner a little bit. But I think that brings the best out of both guys. So I trust Dennis Allen in this situation because I think both guys are going to see the field a lot. Do you go 3-3-5? If you're going up against a team, in a base personnel and it's 4-3, yes, obviously you can get him on the football field, play a lot of Sam linebacker. What do you do in your subsets? Because that's really what it all boils down to. Is he on the field in nickel? Is he on the field during dime? Does it change based off of offensive personnel? Because what if you're not playing a run first or running type quarterback? Is he the best fit matchup wise? Whether or not he's got a cover, whatever the case may be, or is it Pete Werner? So I think he just gives you a defensive game planner, a defensive play caller that Dennis Allen is, another piece to work with that can help you with personnel groupings and dictate matchups and give you better matchups on the field. I think it's going to be a really good addition to the Saints defense. I like Willie Gay.
I'm going to go backwards a little bit here too. Again, when you look at the cornerback position, they bring in Kool-Aid, again, the 2nd-round pick. Alontae Taylor last year. One of the big question marks is going to be the slot corner. They seem to be, again, set on the outside with Debo and Lattimore. There's even, again, great depth at this position. I think it's probably got the most quality depth on the roster. Give me your thoughts on the cornerback position.
Slot or outside?
You go slot first.
I think it's the strongest
outside?
group on the team. Because what you have a Debo, you have Lattimore, but you have Taylor that can play outside and inside. You have Kool-Aid that can play outside and inside. And don't discount Ugo Amadi, who is a guy that can play safety nickel. I actually put him on my roster projection as a cornerback because he played more nickel than safety a season ago. So it's the deepest position on the team. It's the best position on the team, in my opinion. It all boils down to who is your 3rd corner, who is going to play the slot. Is it Alontae Taylor, who had his struggles a season ago? But can he get better? DA said if it started today, he would be the guy. He said last year's ceiling is this year's floor. Interesting comments from DA because DA knows DBs. That's what that is his specialty. You can talk a lot about DA. He knows defensive backs. He knows what works in his system. Kool-Aid McKinstry is interesting because we didn't see him on the field. But he's a guy, I've said this a lot on our shows. I watch a ton of these film study sessions. And if you watch a ton of the Alabama stuff, Nick Saban he created that match coverage, all that stuff. You have got to be an incredibly smart player to be a DB for Nick Saban because there's so much post-snap adjustment that you have to make. And he excelled. He played outside. He can I guess he can play inside. They think he can play inside. So I think that's going to be a valid competition. And I just think the room is bolstered with both those guys on the field. So I think that's going to be the number one competition to camp. When you talk about just who wins that battle is going to get on the field the most. And I think it's a situation where hopefully the addition of Kool-Aid brings the best out of Alontae Taylor. Similar to Willie Gay and Pete Werner. I think that's kind of why they did that because they want him to kind of embrace the challenge there. But I'll say this. Kool-Aid's better, he's going to get on the field. If he's more consistent, understands things better, and it's not an adjustment as much as it's been for Alontae Taylor, he'll get on the field. But like I said with the offensive line, let the tape do the talking. Whoever plays better is the guy that deserves it.
If I'm not mistaken, Adebo's in a contract year as well.
Yeah.
So again,
I think he can play his way to a big contract too.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't realize he had 6 takeaways a season ago, 4 picks, 2 fumble recoveries. He's a guy who's been incredibly consistent. I'm a little, it's very possible they've already started this negotiation, but it might be best for the Saints to get out in front of this a little bit.
You better believe it.
Because he could be incredibly expensive if he has another good year, with teams maybe seeing him as CB1, not a CB2 opposite of Marshawn Lattimore. So he's a guy, he'll have motivation with his contract year. He's a guy who's been really consistent, and he's been pretty durable. Not pretty, but he's been very durable for the Saints since he's been here. So I think Paulson Adebo is a guy that you can make a case last year, top 2 or 3 defender on the team.
Well, again, I saw The Athletic did their top, I don't know, 100 players. When he got honorable mention.
Really?
They had 2 players on from the Saints. One was Demario Davis. The other was Tyrann Mathieu. I mean, the 2 oldest players on the team. So that tells you kind of where the Saints are. All right. To me, the 2 question mark positions for this team are on the defensive line and at safety. I like Tyrann Mathieu at more of a free. Jordan Howden obviously has played. They brought in the kid from the Raiders, John Abram, who again played really well, I thought, and I think he is
stretch,
really, at the strong. You know, again, when you put him inside, he's like another linebacker.
You know, there's no guesswork. You know exactly who he is.
You know what? Talk about that position. Do they need more?
I want to see how this plays out. I could see them targeting that position.
Right.
But you have Amadi that can play it. You have Matthew, you have Howden, you have Jonathan Abram. Am I missing one?
You said Ugo Amadi.
You have JT Gray, obviously.
Right, JT Gray. More of a special teams guy, though.
Yeah, more of a special teams guy. I think I'm missing one at that point, but nonetheless, it'll come to me at some point. Yeah, I could see them addressing that position at some point. But I do think they have high hopes for Jordan Howden. I do think they think he's a guy that can maybe become a starter. I think he's a guy that showed his football IQ on the field last year. He rotated reps in the practices we were able to see. Abram is a guy, Tyrann's going to be free. Abram's going to be strong. But with Howden, maybe you can get a little more versatility based off of matchup. So that could be something to watch. I don't know if it's a pressing need right away. Right. If they aren't showing they're capable of, whoever that is opposite of Tyrann Mathieu, I can see them addressing that position.
All right, let's talk defensive line. I want to talk, again, first of all, another little roll of the dice here with a 1-year deal, but a guy that really could turn out to be a great pick, and that is, again, signing Chase Young. Your thoughts?
Well, he's a premier free agent signing.
Right.
I mean, and look, he's a guy that, when healthy, he's been very productive, had 7.5 sacks a season ago, had 7.5 sacks his rookie season. So when he's on the field, he's been disruptive, and that's what they needed. He needed a disruptive guy off the edge, which is so disappointing because they've invested so much in that position. So to have some level of disappointment there with some of the draft picks obviously is a disappointment. But you bring Chase Young in, relatively low risk, potentially high reward, because Chase Young is simply this. If he comes in and blows up and is a double-digit sack guy, he's getting paid. He may not get paid here, but he's getting paid. He's only 25 years old. However, if once again he comes in, either he doesn't produce or he gets hurt again, that's it for him. He's going to be one of these journeyman guys, going to be 1-year deals the rest of his career. So it's a very important year for Chase Young. They think he's on track to get on the football field, but he has got to be a disruptor. That's what I need to see from Chase Young, and how they mix and match this defensive line grouping is going to be something to really watch, because I still have my concerns about the defensive line. I really do, because there's a lot of, like, even with Chase Young, we think he can be there. Is he going to get there? I mean, there's a reason why he signed a 1-year deal at that position at 25 years old. So I do think there's that's something to watch, because who do you really hang your hat on at that position? What player? Is it Carl Granderson, who's been great? But, I mean, can you get a little bit better at that? I don't know. Or is he the guy opposite, and it's Chase Young opposite him? I don't know. So I do think there's something to really watch with that edge defender position.
And look, if you're not asking Cam Jordan to do everything, maybe you can get a really good year out of Cam Jordan in the twilight of his career, right? Maybe, again, if he's not having to play every down, having to play inside, outside. The other part of this, obviously, is, again, Turner and Foskey. Are you going to get anything out of those guys? But to me, one of the big question marks on this team is the nose tackle position. Okay, they go out and get Boyd in the draft. Brzee really showed something last year. Shepard, Saunders look like, again, they're rotational guys that are backups. Talk about that position, because you got to be able to stop the run in the NFL.
You got to be able to stop the run in the NFL. I do think they want Brzee to kind of take that leap. And I thought Brzee, you go back and watch, he had a good year.
Right.
He had flashes, he had some inconsistencies, rookie inconsistencies, but he had an overall positive season. I do think they want him to take that next step at that. He was drafted because he was well-rounded, a guy that can be disruptive, rushing the passer, getting upfield, and also holding at the point of attack when it comes to rush defense. So he's one they like. Kellen Saunders, I think, is solid. You know what you get out of him. I think he's pretty reliable at that position. Obviously, you saw him play fullback a little bit last year as well. Nathan Shepard is a veteran. You have Christian Boyd, who is a sixth-round pick out of Northern Iowa. We think he can make the roster. We think he can be a player, but the last guy they took from Northern Iowa took some time, and it's the line of scrimmage. So it's not like it's a DB, it's another line of scrimmage player. So I think that's a vulnerable spot. That's a spot I would see. If it were up to me, I would likely address that position with a veteran at the defensive tackle position, because the guy you had that kicked inside in certain situations, Tano Passanio, and now has a torn Achilles or torn ACL, whichever one it is. So he's not going to be ready for a while. I would think, October at the earliest for Passanio. So that's a position that's vulnerable right now. It's thin right now, and
it's a
I'm
hard
not
position
sure where
to
they
fill.
turn. It's not an easy position to fill. So it's a hard position to find depth at. Because it's just a hard position to find in the NFL. There's just so few players that can actually do that job. So, I think that's a vulnerable position for the Saints.
I do. I'm not going to get into special teams because, again, when we have Sean back a little bit later on, after, again, we have a chance to see the kickoff rule and everything else, we'll get into that.
Let me just say.
Go ahead.
Let me just say to the audience.
Yes.
Y'all are going to be mesmerized
totally
with this new kickoff. I kind of underplayed it when it came out, and I was kind of mad at myself when I did, because the first time I saw it, when they practiced it at camp, I was like, oh my God, what is this?
Totally different.
It's going to turn the league upside down. There is going to be so much more emphasis on the return game. I noticed the Saints had 10, 12-minute special teams periods in OTAs. I mean, it was like, wow, this is a long special teams period. They were practicing everything. And obviously, Rizzi is one of the guys that helped create the rule. So I'm telling you, it looks different. And the execution is certainly different. There's going to be a whole lot more returns for touchdowns this season. There's going to be so much more emphasis on that play. I just don't think the common fan really understands right now. When the first preseason game you see, you'll understand it.
And there's going to be you guys are going to be talking a lot about it when you get to California as well, because there's going to be an emphasis on, with the pads, trying to figure out what you got to do in that. All right, let's shift gears to the Pelicans with what we have left in the program. All right. 49 wins, 50 if you want to count the play-in tournament, right? Okay. They got swept in the playoffs. It was a great season for the Pelicans, okay? But they didn't reach the expectations that were thought they were going to take the next step. Now it looks like they're going to be breaking up breaking this thing up. And look, Brandon Ingram is eligible for a $52 million max deal. Based on what he did with Team USA, based on his injury and how he performed in the playoffs, it looks as though he's not getting that. Doesn't look like there's going to be a team in the league that's willing to give him that. He's on the trading block. The question is, will they trade him on draft night, which again, at the taping of this program, we have no idea what's going on with that again. And then, of course, what's going to happen with their draft? They draft 21st in the first round. They don't have any second-round picks till 2030 because they've traded those picks away. It's so difficult when you start talking about the Pelicans, because Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, as players, are very, very good players. They're all-stars. But the problem is they can't stay healthy. So how can you invest in both those guys in the future if ultimately they can't stay healthy? And it looks as though the Pelicans are going in the direction of, we're going to invest in Zion and build around Zion, and Brandon Ingram's going to be the guy we move.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think, if I were given the Pelican circumstances,
what would you
probably be the direction I would go, even though investing in Zion is risky as well. Very risky.
So risky.
Both those guys have struggled to stay healthy. I guess more so in Zion's case.
Zion's never been a playoff team before.
Exactly. But nonetheless, it's very important that it took. Think about how long it took just to get the proper sample size with these guys on the court together to actually make an informed decision.
Right. Took years.
Which is a problem in and of itself. So I think that certainly understand. I think that the Pelicans front office understand, okay, we've stretched this out as long as we can go. We can't keep playing the injury card. We've got to make a move here. So I think Ingram would be the direction I would go. Now, Ingram, in saying that, you don't give away Brandon Ingram. You don't, let him walk for nothing. He is a star in the NBA. He's a guy that has a very specific skill set that can work for a team wanting to contend, or a team needing some offense, needing a mid-range shooter. So perhaps there's a deal that can be made where obviously both sides benefit, which is obviously what everyone wants when you make a deal like that. But I guess big picture, if you're David Griffin and you're handed this situation, I do think it's the correct move to try to repurpose this thing around Zion to give yourself the best sort of output, if you will. Because if you look, they had a good year, but so did everybody else in the Western Conference. I'm looking at Minnesota. I'm looking at Oklahoma City, and they passed them up.
They did.
And it feels like the Pelicans have kind of been stuck in this middle tier, kind of, getting there, kind of inching closer, whereas other teams have really taken that leap. And I think that's what everyone wants to see with the Pelicans. Take that leap, be in the playoff conversation, be in the playoff series where you're winning a series, get to the second, get into the third round. Because you look at OKC, they were able to do that. Right. So I think that's what the problem or the dilemma David Griffin was presented with, and I think this is probably the best solution. That's only part one. Part two is who are you getting in return, obviously, for Brandon Ingram, and we'll see. Obviously, at the time of this tape, we don't know who that is.
Right. So. Well, let me say this. I called Zion Williamson the biggest tease in sports, okay? This group, this core, was the biggest tease in sports. Because you kept waiting and waiting and waiting for them to take the next step. And then when they were on the court together, they were playing really, really good. And now you're getting to the point where, again, you feel like you have to break this thing up. The problem is, again, could you trade C.J. McCollum at 33 years old with $63 million left on his deal over the next 2 years? Yes, probably so, but you're not going to get the value, okay? Brandon Ingram is coming off, again, a bad playoff. Can you get the value here? I guess the charge for David Griffin is to make sure that he gets maximum value for Brandon Ingram. It's the last piece of the Anthony Davis deal, okay? And you have to be able to get some value. So you've got to bring a star back in return, or stars in return.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And not just that, he's got to fit. Players got to fit, because obviously you're making this move because this player is a better fit for what you need with the current collection of Pelicans players on the roster. So yeah, I mean, it's not easy, but I do think there's a deal out there that could be done where you can accomplish both of those things, so where you get yourself back into the situation where you're 49, 50, 51 wins, and maybe that gets you a 5 seed instead of a 7 seed this year. So yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about, because you can't just let them walk. This franchise is still in. They're not unplugging, starting over. No, they're still in. We gotta win now, and I do think that's the right approach given where Zion is in his career. So you do what you have to do. You hope you make the move. Griffin has made some good moves. He's made some questionable moves, but I do think he's a guy that's got to get that deal done.
Ingram's in the same situation Valanciunas was in last year, and Najee Marshall was in last year. Both guys expiring contracts. Neither one of those guys they will get anything for. There's no sign and trade deal. Those guys are unrestricted free agents. Both are expected to be elsewhere next season. So now you're charged with having to find another big, in this case an athletic big, okay, which is what they were saying that Valanciunas couldn't be for them. And a lot of people are talking about a traditional point guard. I believe a playmaking point guard, which is a guy that can create his own shot, a guy that again can also be a playmaker and get guys involved on the offensive side. But again, when the offense breaks down, can do something on their own to be able to get a shot off. Give me your thoughts on what they need going into this offseason.
Well, it's a 1 or a 5. You get a point guard, or get a center, and obviously stylistically a type of center that's a little more in tune with what you're dealing with night in and night out in the Western Conference, which is, look at the success the teams had in the Western Conference, what they had. I do agree with you, because I don't know that there are a whole lot of quote unquote traditional pass first point guards anymore. I mean, they're all kind of these combo types. A guy, but I do think you can upgrade there where you're not just a score guy. You can facilitate, you can distribute, you can run the offense, you can calm things down, play defense. So yeah, 1 and a 5 is obviously, to me, what this organization needs. Because if you really look at the way the Western Conference has kind of evolved, that's what's winning. I mean, that's truly what's winning in the Western Conference.
Today, on the taping of this show, Bryson Graham was finally announced as the new general manager. They've elevated him. He's been with the team since the team was the Hornets. But you cannot downplay what they've lost in the organization in this offseason. Trajan Langdon was one of the best general managers in the NBA. He's a guy with ties into international basketball. Fred Vinson, hands down, if he's not the best, he's one of the best shooting coaches in the NBA, and we saw that here. There's a good chance they're going to lose James Borrego. Again, if he's, possibly maybe to Detroit, that's the only job that's open. If not, maybe somewhere else. And of course, they lost Michael Blackstone, which was a big part of the organization. He left with Trajan Langdon to go to Detroit. Your thoughts on that loss? To me, though, we could talk about Brandon Ingram. We could talk about what they're going to do in the draft. These guys were critical losses for this organization.
Absolutely, and you were lucky to have Fred Vinson as long as you did.
Right.
I mean, how many coaching staffs did he stretch over? Was
Right.
it 2 or 3? I mean, it was quite a bit. Right. I remember his name popping up for the head coaching job when they hired Willie Green. It wasn't anything serious, but it was still his name was out there.
It was more of a courtesy interview.
And obviously, he's a guy that's. It's hard. You can't deny what he's done. It's very tangible, the work he does when it comes to a very specific skill set in teaching guys shooting. And for a guy that had that kind of reputation, like I said, it's very, very fortunate the Pelicans were able to hold on to him for so long over quite a few regimes. And the fact that the new regimes kept him on the roster, to me,
look what he's done.
Coaching staff obviously tells you all you really need to know. So that's a huge loss. And I'm not even sure who you can attract that would have that specific skill set to that amount.
Right.
So that's an issue. But that's the NBA. I mean, that's the NBA.
Right.
You lose Trajan Langdon. I mean, look, they've discovered some guys in the draft that have been very productive. And he's the guy that's really kind of been out in front when it comes to that aspect of the operation. So, yeah, that's another loss. And they're going to have to fill that, obviously, as well with a guy that's been around, obviously, for quite some time.
I'm sorry.
With the
Bryson Graham.
The one they just promoted. Yes,
Bryson
correct.
Graham.
That's the sort of the cycle of, call it life, I guess, in not just NBA, but also every sport, really, when other ones get an opportunity. If you recall, David Griffin interviewed for the job.
Right.
So did Trajan Langdon. And I remember thinking, okay, it's going to be one or the other. Pelicans ended up getting both. They ended up getting both because Trajan Langdon was that well respected. Right. So now he gets his opportunity to run Detroit. It's probably long overdue. I mean, he probably deserves to run his own front office there. So, yeah. So now you got to regroup, and you got to make the correct decisions. But those are the two big losses. And if you lose Borrego, I don't think the outside world understands just how much a head coach leans on that main assistant that usually has head coaching experience.
And he's the offensive guy.
He's the offensive guy. You saw what happened offensively.
You brought him in to put this offense in. And one of my questions is, okay, if he's gone, who runs this offense for you? Do you make another change now in this offense?
It's possible. You may have to if you don't have Ingram. I mean, you may have to, depending on what type of personnel you get. So, yeah, those are all legitimate questions. And it's a big hire. It's a big, couple of big positions to fill for the Pelicans. So they got to get that right because it's one of those things where you can probably tell pretty quickly their absences if things go wrong in the season.
They picked 21st in the draft. Some are saying they're going after an athletic center or again, a point. We'll see how that plays out. The kid Missy from Baylor looks like they've been the guy that's in most of the mock drafts. Again, they could trade out of this pick and try to pick up second-round picks because, again, they gave away their second-round picks, again, in the Devontae Graham to San Antonio in that salary dump. So, again, all of a sudden they have no second-round picks. And in the CBA now with again, the coming of the new salary cap, which, again, will go up with a TV deal, $7.8 billion is what they're talking about for the TV deal per year. Your cap will go up 10%. Second-round picks are going to be huge because if you're over the salary cap, you'll be able to utilize those picks. You'll continue to add players. So, again, the Pels may have to add some second-round picks. We'll see what they do there. All right. Is Griff on the hot seat?
I think he probably should be.
Right. Especially with Langdon leaving.
Warm seat, if you will. I think him and Willie, this combination, I think this has got to happen. I mean, this has got to happen at some point. I think of all the close games they lost a season ago, but down the stretch execution. Was that Willie or was that players? I don't know. I mean, so I do think there needs to be some pressure applied here because you've had this I mean, you've had Zion, and obviously he's been unhealthy, and you just you just feel like there's always these circumstances working against you. At some point, you just got to figure out a way to fight through that. So I do think there needs to be a little more pressure applied. Like I said, I don't know if you call it a hot seat, but I do think there needs to be up the ante a little bit, because 49 wins is great, but if you're no more play-in. I want to be a playoff team. No more play-in.
You sold me the big two forever, and they couldn't stay healthy. Okay, you sold it. Now you're breaking it up. You have to hit on this trade. You have to hit on this trade. I know you want to bring Trey Murphy up. You want to build around him, etc. Herb Jones. I get all that. Building around Zion. Building around Zion is a huge risk because he's never healthy. So you got to get this right. And then again, I don't want to hear as we get into the season transition year. No. Because now you've moved off. This is you mentioned it, Minnesota, Oklahoma City. You've watched teams, Houston's about to leapfrog you, that have leapfrogged you in the West, okay? All right, where you were supposed to be one of those top teams. There can be no more excuses this season. It's a lot like the Saints. You can't have excuses anymore.
No, and honestly, I mean, basketball in this town has had nothing but tempered expectations. There has never been that sort of like, it's time feeling. It just, so you've had a run here with Zion, some nice players that you've drafted have developed into some nice quality basketball players. You've made decent moves in the front office. You've made moves to find some success. You've had some success, but clearly not enough success that I think is acceptable, because just looking at what's happening around the Western Conference and where you currently are, it just feels like there are some ascending teams, descending teams, and you're kind of in that middle tier there. Now, get out of that. Like, and Saints are kind of in that same boat a little bit. You kind of feel like that as well. So it's time to break free. No more transition year. No more we're building. It takes time. It takes patience. Basketball in this town has had a lot of time, a lot of patience. I think it's time to mandate. Even if you're not want to win a title, let's get into the playoffs, win a series, and let's go from there to find some success when it comes to NBA.
I'm going to say something, and I'm just going to, I just think things are too comfortable on airline drive.
Yeah, it gets like
okay, with both organizations, there needs to be some uncomfortability, if that's a word. Okay, with both organizations, because I think they become too comfortable, and that has to start with Mrs. Benson and demanding again championships once again.
I think it's a valid point. I do think there is a little bit of you kind of felt it a little bit last year, a little bit of riding past success. I think that's over. That's over. And I think with the Pelicans, there needs to be a new breed of success, because there hasn't ever seemed to have been any real playoff success with this franchise.
Sean Fazende, Fox 8 Sports, great breakdown for us.
Great, yes.
Thanks again for joining us. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, plenty of ways to catch our program now. Again, there's a QR code on your screen that will, again, click it. It'll take you again to the WLAE-TV website. Also to our YouTube channel. And of course, you could catch all of our previous episodes at ericasher.com, as well as, again, the WLAE-TV YouTube channel. Don't forget, catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM, iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, the 106.1 The Ticket app. I'm on 4 to 6 weekdays. And of course, you can listen live at ericasher.com. Special thanks to our underwriters who make this show possible, the WLAE-TV production staff also, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Alex Chacon, Danielle Wick, and of course our director, William Hill. For Sean Fazende, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.